another episode of Spotlight on Natural Resources, where we shine some light on what's going on in your environment. I'm your host, Erin Garrett.
And I'm your co-host, Abigail Garfalo.
And today we are here with Eliana Brown, who is a water quality and stormwater specialist. And we're going to be chatting all about drought today. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, Eliana. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are talking all about drought today. So why did you choose this topic, Eliana?
Like you said, I'm a water quality and stormwater specialist. So stormwater is rainwater and snowmelt. So usually I'm not talking about the opposite thing of drought. However, it is the other side of the coin. And according to our state climatologist, Trent Ford, Illinois is in a drought. And although we have had some rainstorms in July, we are still in a drought. So I wanted to come to talk about some of the implications of drought and rain with our landscapes. Yeah, that's really because a lot of people think, oh, I got some rain, the drought is over, right? Like it's all gone, it's all done, we're great. But really that's not always what is defining the end of a drought or what exactly it is. So according to the U.S. Drought Monitor, they are looking at whether these intensities of drought, whether we're just abnormally dry all the way up to moderate, severe, extreme, and exceptional droughts. So what Trent has said is that in his blog, he said that we've got some rain in July, but still more than 2/3 of the state of Illinois remains in at least a moderate drought, with 13% of Illinois in severe drought. So there are these different levels of drought. Is that, what like D2, D3 is? Is that what we're talking about when it comes to those things? That's exactly what we're talking about that. And if somebody wants to see what level that they are at, the website is droughtmonitor.unl.edu, which is a website that I'm sure we can put in some show notes, but that will let a person know where we're at. Some municipalities will take those levels to make decisions as to whether they need to impose water restrictions and other kinds of restrictions for a municipality or for an area. Yeah, that's at my area. Definitely. We do like if you're in an odd numbered house, you water on these days, even numbers these days. And then at any time, no matter what day it is for you, you can't water after I think it's 8 a.m. And then you have to water after at least 6 or 7 p.m. in my community. So
that's how it was for me growing up. We'd always gauge how bad the drought was by what color the watering sign was and if we could actually do any outdoor watering. So we don't have restrictions like that in Southern Illinois, but I'm familiar with that, definitely. So I know just speaking from my personal experience in Southern Illinois, we've had some crazy rainfalls and the storms that have just happened. And, we're talking about drought conditions, how we really need the rain. But how useful is that? Really, a lot of rain all at once. How much of that really infiltrates the ground, or is it just all running off into the storm sewers? What is there an ideal amount of rain that we want to help get us out of drought conditions, or how are we doing with these storms that are coming through?
Yeah, that's a great question. Gentler storms are going to be better, and what really concerns me with a drought is one of the other things that Trent has put in his blog, which is that as of June 28th, the 8-inch soil moisture at the Illinois Climate Network station in Champaign was at its driest point on record, and that record goes back to 2004. So we can glean from that is that with the soil being so dry, it's not going to be able to soak up that water very well, so that when we get that big hit of a storm, it's going to run off, not be able to soak in, run off. It can impact our ability for our homes that we may be taking on flooding. There's downstream water quality implications of that sharp kind of runoff with those big, quick storms that happen with that kind of intensity. So that's why it's the two sides of the coin, that when we have those drought conditions, our soil is impacted in a way that makes it less helpful for us for the times when we have the big storms.
I makes me think of like when I water my plants and I like dump too much water on it at once, and all the water, it doesn't get time to actually infiltrate it. It's most of it's just going to run off right away. So,
And we have some great resources from Extension, as you well, I'm sure, know about how to deep water. 'Cause that's the kind of watering that we want to do when we are, say, watering our food gardens. We want to do that deep watering so that the plant can uptake the water better, and that the water is going to be it's going to be a better kind of watering.
yeah, because the roots will go essentially where the plant, or excuse me, the roots will go where the water is. And so if you're only watering a little bit, essentially, is what you're saying, the roots are going to stay nice and shallow versus if you water them nice and deep, the roots are going to grow deep. And then they're even long term going to be more protected from those drought conditions because those roots are deeper down, more buried, less susceptible to those dry conditions that are happening.
Exactly. And when we have that kind of deeper roots like that, just the exactly what you're saying, that's going to be better for the plant, but it's also much better for the soil. And what I want to get across today is what we're trying to do is really build that soil so that it can be there for us when we have the rain, so that we can act kind of like how a wetland does. So we can act like a sponge, and that's the condition that we want. And we don't want a wetland in our yards, obviously. We want there to be that resilience, and building our soil is one of the best ways to get there. It's one of the reasons why it is recommended that with our turf grass lawns, we want to mow at the 3-inch level instead of much shorter, because we want the turf grass to have that ability for the roots to grow as long as they can. With turf grass, there's a limit to that. So that may be a segue into talking about other plants and grasses that naturally have longer root systems. But even with our turf grasses, this is these longer roots for better soil. This is something that we want to have in the forefront of our minds, even with that kind of plant.
So how else can we build resiliency for these droughts in our landscape? So we want to like mow at 3 inches. We want to water deeply when we do water. What are some other tips for us?
Well, I am so glad that you asked that question, because we do happen to have these. So, well, the answer to everything today is going to be native plants. So,
And you're in the right podcast, Eliana. This is the crew for that. So
you're yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a really amazing thing, is that anymore and I'm not talking about our plants that we're growing for food, any of our in our small gardens that we have, watering would be needed for that. What I'm really thinking about is with our ornamental plants that we have in our landscapes, where we're at right now in facing a reality of, wow, we're in a drought. Wow, we do have these severe storms that are happening intermittently. So now is the time that we really want to be thinking about the resiliency of our own properties. And if only there were plants, even some very beautiful plants that can withstand drought and even flood. And that is so many of our beautiful Illinois native plants. Now, not all native plants can do that as well as some of the other ones, but what we're learning at the Red Oak Green Garden is that we're learning with that demonstration project that's on campus. We're noting which plants have done well this year and which ones haven't, so that we can have a better idea of what kinds of native plants that we can support well at this garden, which may give us some indication for what people can do at their own homes.
Definitely. I know in my gardens with my native plants, as we were getting into June and the drought was, really starting to ramp up, I wasn't doing any additional watering except for ones that I had in pots. Because I do have some in pots, and those you could tell they were stressed, right? But everything planted in the ground was doing fine. I didn't add any additional water, and everything was great, which is wonderful for me because I hate watering. So I kind of really this, and I get eaten by bugs the whole time. And so if I can put plants in the ground, obviously water them to get them established. That first year, maybe 2 years is really important. But after that point, I'm finding at least the selections that I have in my yard have been doing really, really great. And it's just nice because I get to enjoy them and don't have to do the work and don't have to worry about losing my favorite, plant during this drought. I don't know, Abigail, how's your native plant garden been doing?
It's been doing great. I mean, I think we've been getting a little more rain, and like less of those drastic ones. We still get we've gotten a few of those like big drastic storms, but there hasn't been time much for them to dry out in between. But even during that really long drought, I was like, man, I just gotta I was annoyed because I planted like 30 plants this spring, and I'm never doing that again. But I definitely like my established ones that are about 3 seasons old have been doing amazing. And they've actually been protecting my yard from flooding during those really big storm events. So I used to have what I called the Garfalo Creek in the sidewalk in front of our house between the parkway and my yard. And this season, even in these drastic storm events, I haven't been getting that. And so maybe there's some other things going on, but I'm attributing it to my pollinator garden in front of my house. And so, yeah. And honestly too, I'm a lazy gardener. Erin talks about she hates watering. I personally am like, if I don't have to do it, I won't. And that's what I love about perennials. It's going to come back every year, right? And B natives, because like they're meant to be there. I'm like, oh, well, it's meant to look like just a little messy, that's fine. And all I have to do is kind of weed the things I don't want. And even then, I'm like, well, it's not really hurting anything by being there. And so I don't know, it helps with my wallet. It helps with my time and all the things. And so, yeah, I'm a big native proponent.
Well, and it can relieve us of some guilt. It used to be the goal was that we would try to have the most, exotic plant because it was this beautiful ornamental. And then if we didn't have all of the time that would require to remembering to water it and remember to do all the things that you needed to do to baby that, then it would die or not do well. And well, I have none of that in my own house and garden. Like there's
no time for that, Eliana. We have things to do.
And I literally don't have time for that. But really, for me, it's a big relief to have the goal be, wow, we want to have a resilient, sustainable landscape that we can take care of, that doesn't use so many resources. It can be as beautiful as what some of the gardens of the past were. It's a different kind of beauty, but no less important or valid a beauty. And we need to also remember that water is a resource, but our time is also a resource. So what I'm promising here is that we can have it all. We can have a beautiful garden.
Eliana, don't tease me with a good time.
Well, no, we can have really beautiful gardens that build our soil, relieve ourselves of guilt, and there are things that I think are also can be very in line with our values, so that our kids and grandkids can be proud of the kind of gardens that we are establishing now. And summer right now is a good time to be thinking about what we might want to be doing with some of our fall plantings, because right now it's way too hot to plant. Even those the 30 plants that you put in, or what the plants that you put in.
I put them in the spring. I just was annoyed that I had to water. And honestly, the ones in my shade garden, I didn't really water. I was like, they'll be fine. They're shade.
Well, so this is the thing. When you are establishing native plants, there is watering that you do have to do. And you may have to do it definitely the first year, some even the second year. You have to watch to see how that is going. With the red oak rain garden, with this drought that we had at the end of June, before we got rain, things were changing very quickly. And we decided to do one watering so that we didn't want to lose a number of plants, but we noted which ones were not doing as well, which was going to go into some thinking about what we might be doing differently or changing this fall. So we did one watering, but it's still a relatively young garden. And so some of our shrubs in particular were the ones that were showing some signs of drought that we needed to pay attention to. Just, it's a much bigger plant, going to take a longer time to establish. But some of our, one of the other plants I think that surprised me a bit, and I had the same thing happen in my own garden, was wild ginger. So it went flat as a pancake in June. It was not looking good at all, just down to the ground. And that was happening in my own garden, except for there were some areas where it didn't happen in my garden. Now, at the red oak rain garden, we have it around trees, and in my garden, it was happening around trees. Where it wasn't around trees, they were fine. So we're thinking that it might have something to do with the trees really needing that water more. Wild ginger, right?
I was just gonna say that. I was like, I wonder if those trees were just like really retaining. Interesting.
Yeah. But after it rained, they popped right back up. So they were resilient, and that to me, keeps their place in the garden. That this is a plant that's still going to do well, and that's good. These are things we want to be thinking about. We want to know what's doing well, what's not doing well, so that we could make some decisions. Other plants that did really well were wild petunia. Wild petunia was growing out of ground that was cracked. Yes,
Yeah, it's amazing. Yes, I just dug up a bunch of plants in July because I moved, and they hated me because it was 90 degrees. And the wild petunia is like, you took me out of the ground and put me in a pot. You can't even tell. It's amazing. Amazing. I can't believe it. And it just pops up little babies all over the place and makes a big clump. I love it. I love it.
And it's so pretty. The flower is gorgeous. The color is this beautiful lavender, and it's such a wonderful plant. Our sodas and grasses also did really well.
What I love that you're talking about too, Eliana, is like you approached the drought and like the way the gardens were reacting from like a scientific perspective. Like I feel like people think science happens like in these labs and like it's like, no, we're all scientists like when we're in our garden being like, and like taking that quote naturalist perspective of, okay, there's a drought. I want to know, like, I'm not just going to freely water everything. I'm going to be like, this plant's struggling. This plant's doing well. This one's struggling. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to note that, or I'm even going to write it down in a journal or something. And so I think that's really important when it comes to like gardening and even just preparing for drought or just being like building resilient landscapes. Is paying attention and noticing what's happening. And so I'm so glad to hear that that's happening, and something really cool. I think that just kind of makes you feel a little nerdy. Like, so.
Oh, it's a lot nerdy. And yeah, it's a lot nerdy over at the Red Oak Rain Garden. Yeah, in my house. Yeah, for sure.
But even that being said, there are lots of other, we're approaching this today from picking plants that withstand drought, right? That's a really great way that we can add it. But we have this one difficult spot at my parents' house that they've never been able to grow anything. It's super dry, super hot and sunny. And I was like, we could put native plants there. And my parents were like, it's not going to work. Nothing ever grows there. And I'm like, wait, I will show you. And my mom just texted me this morning. Her brown-eyed Susans that I gave her are starting to bloom, and they're doing amazing. Swamp milkweed, even swamp milkweed, yes, in that dry spot. Prairie drop seed, those grasses, some of those other like really resilient plants are doing amazing. And she wanted them because she saw them in my garden. She saw how beautiful they were and how well they were doing. And so she's getting the added benefit of they're actually growing in that one landscape bed that nothing grew for like 20 years. Like,
You're like, look how green my thumb is, your mom says. She's like, wow, like I just had to find the right plant. Like,
Well, and that's it. The you go back to right plant, right place, the best Santo way of looking at things, and it is so it's it's just it works. And you do get to feel like a gardening genius when you're like, wow, this thing it's beautiful, it's thriving. Oh, Erin, good job.
I'm very excited. Yeah,
the word.
beautiful things too, right? That don't need as much work. So, I encourage people to find a native plant, a place that's selling native plants, look online, just explore, dream, get excited, find things that look beautiful, and then look at what conditions they can withstand and test them out. Like you can approach it that way too, definitely. Like more traditional gardening, right? I want to find the most beautiful plant that none of my neighbors have, right, Eliana? Except it's a native plant this time that we're going to add in rather than the ornamental that we're going to bring over.
And you're honestly more likely to have something unique if you do that, right? Like if you're trying to find, I get so many comments from my neighbors about my Illinois bundle flower in my front yard because it's like a little weird. But I've grown it with 3 together. So it's like, looks like a giant bush, but like it's sensitive plant essentially. And so it's like, and so everyone, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I'm like, I have seedlings here. Like I'm starting
So at the Red Oak Rain Garden, that was purple poppy mallow. People would just stop and say, "What is that?" Because it's so gorgeous. It blooms for a super long time. It's a ground cover. It has a multitude of uses, and it's just jaw droppingly beautiful.
Yeah.
So you see, you can have it all.
Speaking to my dreams, Eliana.
No, and I guess I'm speaking to all the beautiful nerds out there, right? The people that love beauty, want to be successful, have that sense of accomplishment, and be able, if you want to nerd out to the science of it, you can nerd out to the beauty of it too. There are multitudes of ways to nerd out to all of this, but it kind of all comes down to that discovery of what is really meant to be here. And there's really nothing more satisfying, I think, than having a little piece of or the Illinois prairie or the Illinois wetlands or whatever biome that your own landscape is going to support the best, and bring that back to what we had in your own little patch of lawn or your own little patch of ground that you have.
And also too, I mean, all your neighbors have brown grass from the drought, and you're like, my thriving garden is looking great. So come on over to my house. Like,
that is true. That is true. I think one of the things that surprised me the most was that did really well was cardinal flower and the sedges and grasses are in the basin of the Red Oak Rain Garden. Because one would have thought that some of those plants that can survive the deluge of big rains, and that's what you have at the bottom of those basins, one would have thought that, wow, those probably wouldn't do as well in a drought, but they are. And again, I think that does come back to the idea of resiliency. And we know our turf grasses being just don't have that same resiliency that the native plants are going to have because they're not from here. They're not of here.
They've been babied for so long.
Well, root length. I mean, again, speaking as someone who just tried to dig some native plants, there are some that I could not get out of my garden because the roots were so deep. That bundle flower, don't ever plan on moving it. Because I tried one year and I got about 16 inches deep and then I broke the root off and then I did replant it and it's fine. It made it. But I knew I was not going to try to move that one again. So just those crazy root systems that they're able to develop. That's why, right? They're doing so well in these drought conditions. And so word of caution, make sure you like where you plant these native plants. But then they will be there, right? They will be there and they will do amazing over time. And really be able to withstand all of these different conditions that our climate is throwing at them.
That's a good point. I was also going to add too is we're speaking to the nerds, but let's just take a minute to speak to the lazy people out there who just like want a nice garden and don't know how to do anything about it.
I know it's mutually exclusive.
Yeah, true. I am not a landscape designer or a landscape architect, and I do not find joy in being like, "Ooh, I'm going to put these colors here and these that's not my vibe." And so I used some really handy resources from the Red Oak Rain Garden and just took their designs that they give freely, and they're totally, Eliana, I'm assuming you're totally cool with. And that's what they're for. And so I'll let Eliana pitch those, but those resources, I hand those out constantly in my work, and people love them. And I'm like, you know what? You don't even have to come up with a design. Somebody made it for you and wants you to use it. So I'll let you talk about those a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks so much for mentioning it. So I am the director of the Red Oak Rain Garden, and when we first started thinking about native plants and how to best encourage other people to use native plants and to establish rain gardens, it kind of came from some experience that I had from going to a native plant sale. And my background is engineering. I am a master gardener, but I am not a landscape designer. So I would go to the native plant sale, and one of two things would happen. I would either come home with every plant that the native plant nerds, the beautiful native plant nerds had talked me into because they're gorgeous, and I just, I just bought them all. And then they sit in my driveway because I didn't know what to do with them. And, this is and I'd feel shame, and that was just not a good way of approaching it. Or I would go to the native plant sale and I would end up with nothing because I would be super overwhelmed. And that's not good either, because what we really need to do is we need to buy the native plants. We need to get them in the ground. That's that's the idea. And so I thought, if somebody would hand me just a plan or a kit, be like, this is what you need to do with this patch of ground. This is where you need to go. So I started hanging out with landscape architects. I figure out how I can start working with them to make this plan happen. And that's when I met Lane Canopi, who was a student at the time. And I saw some of his work that he was doing as a student, because he was studying landscape architecture and he is a native plant aficionado. We had a lot of things in common. Hired him, and we created the first of those native plant brochures. He, of course, as Erin and Abigail, as you both know, he's been working with me at Extension ever since then, and has just expanded the number of these brochures so that it can work and represent the many different biomes that are in the Red Oak Rain Garden and can work in different parts of people's yards, no matter what kind of conditions that they have. So you can find them at the Red Oak Rain Garden website, and you can download them for free. Abigail, thank you so much for giving them out to people. I know that they are available from a lot of the extension county units, and we just really appreciate that they have worked so well for so many people. Get those plants in the ground so that we can be more resilient, so we can build that soil.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eliana, for chatting with us today all about native plants and how they can withstand drought. We got slightly off topic, but I love it. That's totally where we were going.
Talking to the right crew, honestly.
Native plants, tying in drought. We got it. So now it's time for our special spotlight. This is the point of the show where we each shine a spotlight on something cool that we saw in nature this month. So Abigail, do you want to go first?
I will. I'm just racking my brain. I know I promised something earlier. Now I'm like, no. So my job is constantly having me see things in nature and go, oh, I could use that for a class, or that would be a really good item for my library of items. And so there's this silver maple in front of my neighbor's house, and he was like cleaning it up and stuff, and a branch had fallen like this, like I would say, I don't know how thick, around like a 6 inches, something like that, around maybe even a foot. And it was just so cool because it had a bunch of woodpecker holes in it. And I just loved the idea of like being able to keep that, because I do activities. I train the master naturalist in my county, and I do an activity that I stole from our colleague Peggy Doty, in which she gives everybody a random nature item and has them ask as many questions as they can about it, except for what is it. So they can ask, where did it come from? Who eats it? How does it grow? If it's a plant, whatever. But they can't ask what is it, because essentially what our master naturalists are learning is that ends the conversation. They learned it's an oak, but they don't know anything about oaks. Maybe that person who asked that question. So you don't get to talk about it anymore. And so I was really excited to add that item to my library of that kind of activity, because it's interesting. Got some lichen growing on it. It's got just some really cool different things that you can ask about it. And I just find that really cool. And I love nature stuff like that. So it's added to my library.
That's awesome. I love that. Eliana, what's your special spotlight?
Well, my special spotlight has just been looking out my back window into my backyard just as dusk is starting. From this conversation, it's probably a surprise to no one that I have a full prairie and one swath of my backyard. On the other swath of my backyard, I have a native shade garden. And there are so many, well, what we call them in Southern Illinois lightning bugs, but I know other folks call them fireflies. It is just filled with fireflies. And just as dusk is happening, as the sun is really starting to come down, it's just a little light show back there. And it's just such a delight to take a look at.
Magical. I love that. All right, Erin, take it away.
All right. So mine comes from last week. For those that don't know, the last week in July every year is National Moth Week. Well, it's a very exciting time. We get to focus on very cool pollinators that are usually ignored, which are our moths. And we had several different programs that we put on last week. And one that I went to was a nighttime moth hike that Kevin Rowling, one of our colleagues out of Dixon Springs Ag Center, led. And so we were out at nighttime going through the forest to these moth light traps that he had set up. And it was just very cool. First of all, how many people came that were interested in going out to hike in the woods to potentially get as many chigger bites as I did, which was not the fun part. But to see really cool moths, and just, we didn't see like the big magnificent silk moths, right? They were like tiny little guys, but we saw tons of other beetles, and just being out at night and hearing just the sounds of nighttime of the forest and not being scared, and just being with a big group of people and experiencing that. And of course, seeing moths was just really special. So I encourage everyone, it's a great time to just leave your light on your back porch and sit back there and see what comes and flutters by your windows. I have had Luna moths come up to my house before, where you hear a little thump on the window and then you look and it's this big green Luna moth. So take some time, make some observations, and you'll be really surprised what you can see. But moths are awesome, and we need to appreciate them a little bit more. So that's my special spotlight.
I love that. And if you're feeling a little more inspiration as you hear Erin's special spotlight, you can go back a few months in the archives and listen to Amy Leffringhouse's Nature at Night episode. So some really good stuff. And there's actually up around me, there's a lot of night hikes going on right now because it's so hot during the day. Everyone's like, let's do night hikes. And I think we're seeing some really cool things. So definitely encourage to do it safely. But even just your backyard, seeing some cool things, like really awesome. So great.
And bug spray.
Yeah, and bug spray. Please bug spray.
Definitely bug spray. Is it, do you call them night butterflies? Because that's how I think of moths, is night butterflies.
No, but I love that.
Rebranding. Everybody, we're rebranding butterflies now. It's no longer, because they're all lepidopteras, like
Like,
night butterflies.
taking it. Thank you
Yep.
for that. I love it. All right. Well, this has been another episode on the Spotlight on Natural Resources podcast. Check out our podcast next month, where we talk with Rachel Curry and Nicole Haberback, who are our Watershed Outreach Associates, and they're going to be talking all about nutrient loss. So join us then. We'll see you all.